Oh, but it. Check it out. This chick is totally hot.
No, she's not, dumbass.
You're a dumbass.
Your mom's a dumbass.
Yes, she is.
She's kinda hot, though.
I've always really enjoyed watching The Amazing Digital Circus since it started, even if I'd call it a hit-or-miss show. Sometimes it can be surprisingly mature, namely when Kinger shares his wisdom both with the characters and the viewer. But in one or two scenes, it can feel like just a mental health PSA. Even though the problem of mental illness in the topical sense of depressed and anxious teenagers is a matter of physical brain chemistry just as much if not more than it is your mental purview, and the very notion that mental illness is some anomalous dark cloud that can only be medicated is what's making ourselves pollute our brains with chemical imbalances, making ourselves mentally ill. But I digress. I wasn't really interested in the speculative psychoanalyzing aspect of the show that theorists have been making videos about, or at least up until very recently, where all of the questions opened up by the most recent episode as of writing this. Episode 7 have had time to simmer in my brain, and while I'm far from alone in that regard, I'd like to talk about something that I haven't noticed anyone else address. That being the contrast between Kinger and Jax, particularly in the way both of these characters have learned to cope with the circus, with losing their friends, family, and life as a whole. So, I'm just gonna start yapping about the thing I sat down to yap about. Here's your transition. Now, the thing that makes these two characters and their psychology worthy of making a whole video about just them is that if we were to put everyone on a ranking... Wait, how did that get... a ranking of emotional maturity, Kinger and Jax would each be on the opposite end of the spectrum. For now, Jax is self-explanatory, and if you've seen the show so far up to episode 7, which I'm going to assume you have, Kinger is too. But I want to emphasize just how mentally and emotionally mature and endurant he's had to be not to abstract. To start, it's heavily implied that Kinger had a role in creating the circus, and he brought his wife Queenie into the game with him. We know she abstracted, and that it could have been Kinger's fault, either directly or indirectly, just by bringing her to the circus. Kinger's memory of it is hazy, but these words of his in particular made me interpret that, at the very least, he feels responsible for her fate.
In this world, the worst thing you can do is make someone think they're not wanted or loved.
But it's not just the guilt and grief of Queenie that burdens him. Every time he's somewhere dark and can think clearly again, he also can't think of everyone else in the circus, whether or not they're still around, without the guilt that all of them wouldn't have had their entire lives and even dignity ripped away from them into this cognito hazard of a purgatory if it weren't for his mistakes. And with what we've seen really happens when someone is on the brink of abstraction, it'd be all too easy, seemingly valid even, for Kinger to see himself unworthy to continue on and to join Queenie in the same fate. You'd think that the glitch mentally handicapping him whenever he's somewhere illuminated, although even the show itself is calling the consistency of that into question, is the only thing keeping him intact. But I think that betrays who Kinger really is in the moments we get to see him, and just how wise he is. But to go deeper into that, I'm first gonna need to talk about...
Oh, Jax!
Jax needs no introduction. After all, we've all heard the official Jax theme song composed by Exploshi. If you're all caught up on TADC as of this recording, then you know he's living in denial, and that the way he treats others within the circus both is and isn't a manifestation of it. It's like his way of adapting to the circus was an inner last-ditch effort that seemed to have paid off in the short term, but by the time he pushed everyone away, possibly into abstraction, it was already too late to turn around and face the blaring music, because if he was dead set on not doing so back then he never will now. Boy, does that remind me of someone. While Jax can be justifiably written off as something along the lines of a sociopath, his mental hang-ups and worldview, as I'm about to go into, are startlingly widespread within and around the more depressed and cynical biomes of the internet. Picture Rick and Morty and Joaquin Phoenix Joker. I myself even fell into this frame of mind years ago, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video. See, the problem isn't exactly as straightforward as Jax is in denial. is that he prides himself on a shallow self-awareness of the world around him, that since his experience and circumstances have wizened him up to the insignificance of everything, he now knows what does and doesn't matter, or what is and isn't a quote-unquote waste of time to ruminate on. I've been there, saying I'm not ruminating on the past as a way to rephrase stuffing down grief and trauma, and living in a vicious cycle of consuming and doom-scrolling media that reflected my despair and broken trust in the world, then later coping with the mantra of, at least I'm aware, and reinforcing that all of this pain and negativity was the only truth, instead of actually trying to be aware and question the reasoning and validity of the miserable sound bites in my head. What Jax framed as an epiphany to Pomni is really just a defense mechanism that distances himself from everybody so that the past can never possibly repeat itself. And I know that when you stay in that place of emotional solitary confinement and never come to terms with life, the possibility of growing a covert animosity for everyone around you is very real. Especially since quote-unquote protecting yourself from other people's perspectives will force you to project the way you feel about yourself onto the perspectives of others. The show even symbolizes this with Jax's tail, which represents his base instinct, or the dead end of his sensory and psychological comprehension. It disappears when he speaks what's actually on his mind around Pomni, and then when he suddenly starts pushing her away at the end of the gun episode, there it is. But what Jax gets wrong, among other things, is that it's not that life is insignificant, just that it doesn't last forever. Everything will change and change and change until it's completely unrecognizable, or in other words, disappear. Even the circus will eventually disappear, if not by the computer they're in falling apart due to neglect, then by the satellites and submarine cables holding up everything connected to the internet. That being said, loss is still painful as all hell. And detachment isn't about becoming emotionally numb. The complete opposite, actually. And so there's really only one thing you can do with the futility of grief. Well, two things. Of course, you have to allow yourself to be sad for as long as you need to be. But when the dust has settled, gratitude for what was is the lodestar. And Kinger knows this.
Good memories can do a lot. Hold on to them.
What he means by that isn't to get stuck on the past, but to keep the light you experienced in times that no longer exist, so you can keep your heart warm moving forward, so you don't forget what love feels like, and remember that it's possible. It can feel pitiful, from experience, I know, but if you know that nothing matters, and you're not just being nihilistic to bolster your emotional barriers, then the seemingly most futile choice is the only truthful one there is, isn't it? And it's actually the bravest choice, too, to not let your heart go calloused and cold, even when your world is caved in on you. To at least be a campfire for yourself and others among the rubble. Otherwise, whether you're aware of it or not, you're going to slowly try and burn everything you have left, banking on the hope that when you've stuffed out all of the reminders of what's no longer here, that you'll finally be at peace. Only, if you already refuse to open up to darkness, and then you go out of your way to smash all the lights, well, you can probably guess along the lines of what's going to happen next.